Mr. Marc Sanderson, how are you?
I'm very good, sir. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm actually glad to be back on the line with you.
Well, good. It's nice. We've had some good conversations so far. Hopefully today will also likewise be beneficial and good.
Yeah, be a good conversation. Well, you and I have met now once face to face, a
Yes.
couple times over the phone, getting ready for this interview because we had to massage a topic and make sure we're adding a lot of value. And these are some tough times in the construction market, in cabinetry, because things look good
Yes.
and there could be something else coming that we. It's up to me to put those ideas on the table, the business level ideas. And Marc, I think you've
Yes.
got. Can I tell everybody the topic of this, and then I'll get you to
Yes.
introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Please.
Okay.
Please, Tom.
So for people listening, by the way, this is a YouTube video. You can watch it there. You can see Marc and I, our smiling faces, our animated. You got to see Marc's background on his video. It is an awakening moment.
It's intense.
It's
It's
I
very
like it. I like it. I'm not going to lose focus on. And then for those of us who are listening here as an audio, of course, this is here on all the podcast platforms. But today, I've got Marc here to talk about the secret formula bankers are using on woodwork shops. And it's a formula they use in the background they never talk to us about. I learned this all from you, Marc. But it's their thumbnail for how they're going to, whether they're going to lend us or not, whether they're going to call our lines or not. So why don't I go back to you, Marc? Marc, can you tell us who you are and what you're doing talking on this show?
Yeah, so it depends on which hat I put on. And so I'll describe it in a couple different ways. One, I'm a father of three boys. There's always different ways that one can describe oneself.
Yeah.
So we kind of got the family piece. Let's put the business hat on for a second. I actually own two businesses. First one is Wilkie Sanderson. Have owned that one for now 23 years. It was Ron's Cabinets back in 1997 when we first purchased that. And I still have all my fingers, so I'm not from the woodworking industry. I'm actually from the automotive industry. Harvard grad. I got my MBA from Harvard, my undergrads from the University of Michigan. In mechanical engineering, decided to go look for a business to buy, woodworking. As some of my friends have said, what in the world are you doing in the woodworking business? Are you nuts?
They say that to me too. Yeah. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But, we looked for companies to buy for about 2 years. Lucky number 13 was the offer. And 2 weeks after we made the offer, we owned the business. And so since 1997 and about 3 million in size, and about 60 employees, we're around 20 million today on the woodworking side. But the other reason that I'm here, another hat, if you will, that I wear, is I'm also an owner in Innergy. It's a software firm for our industry.
Right.
Innergy was born out of a relationship we have with a Poland firm called Silver Media. But part of what we've done at Wilkie over the last 23 years, we had a developer on staff, our own developer on staff, and we wrote our own software. And so I would argue this business isn't necessarily about the sawdust. Styles and VSA and those type of firms make the sawdust easy. The hard part is understanding the ones and zeros. It's understanding the non-sawdust aspect of what we do, and that's what we got excited about 23 years ago.
Well,
so hopefully that helped, Tom.
That does help. That does help. And the people that listen to this show are listening because this show is about business operations and about business ownership. And if I can use the word that might make some people feel uncomfortable, it's about entrepreneurship.
Yes, it is.
And that is about business process all the way through, not sawdust.
Yes. It's the ones and zeros. It's that process from the beginning when you're aware of that project that you have decided to bid or not to bid. And that's an important distinction, even up front in the sales process. But today's about the banking, all the way through to the point at the end when we get our final check and we're done. It's all workflow. It's all process. So I'm picking up what you're laying down, Tom. I agree with you.
Well, I'm glad you're here. And the reason that I asked you to be on the show is because far too often it's technicians in the business. People who started, typical story, although it has some different flavors, is I started in my basement or in my garage or in the barn. I made my aunt's kitchen and somebody liked it. So I made another kitchen. And now we're doing 300 grand, 400 grand, a million, 2 million, 9 million, whatever it is. And those owners, and Mark, you probably hear the same conversation, you know, you walk into their office. I guess walking into the office is an old fashioned way to talk now. You have to excuse me. I'm older than Google. I mean, what do I, but you know, when you finally get into a private conversation with the business owner, they kind of look around and go, Dom, I don't know. I have the same dog as when I started, and now we're X 100,000 or X million dollars. What do I do next? And so I think that's actually part of this conversation.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. When you look at the entrepreneurs and average size in our industry, architectural woodworking, for example, is about 5 million. So most of the entrepreneurs are smaller. 50% are smaller than that 5 million number. You're spot on, and you're right. They were either a really good PM, they loved working with their hands, they just grew up in the business. And now they're to the point, I would argue, where they can't wrap their arms around the business anymore. Entrepreneurs that are probably listening to your show can't touch their fingers as they try and wrap their head around. And so it's, okay, what's next? And I would also argue that can your organization actually outgrow the leadership of the organization? I think the answer is no. And so unless the entrepreneur is growing faster, both mentally, capability, in a business sense, the organization's never going to outgrow that entrepreneur.
I have a saying that helps me with this because I'm often dealing with business owners who have that doubt. It's called the imposter syndrome, if anybody's familiar with it. But here's the saying that goes along with it. And for those of you who have coffee in your mouth, please don't spit it out. In the land of the blind, the man with one eye is king. Right? And
Fair.
so as the owner, as long as we're always working towards improvement, which by the way does not always mean higher revenues.
Right.
But as long as we're always working towards improvement, we'll be fine. It's when we as the leaders take our eye off that improvement that people around us will pass us.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting point. I like that. You and I could have, I think, a much longer conversation than we're about to have.
I bet we could. We're going to get really narrow here in a moment or two. So I bet we could have some really good dialogue.
You don't have a crystal ball, although that graphic behind you is some sort of space age crystal ball. I'm saying that for Christensen's benefit if he listens to
this.
Yeah. But what do you think? You know, we're in a place right now where if I listen to the media, they're saying the sky is falling, business is over, restaurants can't keep up, you know, they're not going to make it. And yet when we talk to people in construction, they're as busy as they've ever been. Labor is impossible to find.
Yep.
Products can be in short supply. I know we had a problem with obviously plexiglass and those kinds of products for a little while. With your crystal ball, where do you think we're going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me chat a little bit about history, because I think that's the point that we start, is we can learn a little bit from what's happened over the, let's say, the last 25 years. And I agree with you. We're right now at Wilkie, we're very busy. We went through our COVID PPP loan very quickly. We haven't missed a beat. However, that's not what historically happens in this industry. So let's go back and look at 2001, if you will, the 9/11 induced recession. Slight tick on the industry. It lasted about 8-9 months officially. But the downturn, when you track the profitability of our industry, the profitability didn't hit its lowest point till about 16 to 20 months after the start of that recession. It's like, okay, that's one data point to think about. Let's think about the Great Recession. The Great Recession was about, 18 to 20 months in length, started in late 2007, early 2008. And if you again look at when the low point was in profitability of our industry, it was about 24 to 30 months later. And so I have a rule of thumb relative to the recessions. Take the length of the recession, double it, and that's when our industry is going to hit the low point. And if you look back at history, not only of the 25 years, but you can go back, I have data back to the 60s. Whenever we hit a low point, it's about a 2 to 3 year recovery after that, historically, in terms of construction, for us to get back to that recovery pace.
It's a little bit like indigestion. You eat that chili dog, and you feel fine.
Yes.
And 20 minutes later,
yeah,
you get the indigestion or, the hiccup or the echo, whatever analogy. I like the chili dog analogy for some reason. I don't know. I was thinking about baseball games.
That works. We won't take that analogy to its full extent.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But the point is that we need to be aware that there can be some echo effect. I mean, I think of the echo effect of builders, the people that are really driving our industry, because unless they're building, we're not putting stuff in there.
Exactly.
If they had a little hiccup and they stopped putting in housing permits and building permits and stopped getting approved, there has to be an echo effect 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years down the line. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there is. And the cool thing about our industry, Dom, is that echo, we get to hear the initial noise before and we have some time to now react. So we know we're in a COVID downturn. In addition to not only seeing the start of that recession and hearing that echo, there's a data that I track that I would argue is a very, very good leading indicator for what's going to happen on a macro basis for our industry. And it's the AIA, Architectural Institute of America's Architectural Billing Index. It's the ABI. And so I've been tracking that for the last 25 years. And if I look at the history of the ABI billing index and I compare that to the profitability of our industry, but I shift those two graphs by 18 months, the ABI index almost perfectly matches the profitability of our industry. That lag match, that echo effect, to use your terminology, is a great way for us to understand what's going to happen and help us prepare for that moment in time.
Let me potentially throw you off.
That's okay.
How's that for
I'm okay with that.
I actually doubt I can throw you off, but this is
I bet you could.
This is my weak attempt at it. Sounds like part of what we're talking about is new construction. Production, cabinetry, architecture, millwork for speculative homes or new stuff. 100%. What about the renovation market?
Yeah, great question. And so what I'm answering your questions right now, Dom, from a macro perspective of what's going on in the total construction industry. And you're spot on with that analysis. So any of your listeners are like, well, wait a minute, we're not in the architectural side and we're in the remodel home construction, or we are in the, whatever you fill that out, I promise you that there is data out there for you to glean. And so let me use a story or an example from Wilkie here for a second. So yes, I can tell you what happens on a macro basis after a recession to the construction market. Well, I drill down further and I say, okay, that macro data from the federal government is made up of about 25 to 30 segments or markets or specific data points. You could even look at it geographically if you wish. Federal government has construction data by state. And so if you're a small millwork firm in the state of California or Southern California, you can look up that data doing only home construction or remodel. And so what we do at Wilkie is we take that macro information, we then glean it to say, okay, what markets are we in? And what's happening to those markets? And so when we did that analysis after the Great Recession, the markets that we played in dropped by 40%. So from peak to valley, just in the markets we played in, even though the GDP only dropped by, let's say, 5% with the Great Recession, our markets went down 40%. And so knowing that and seeing it is a great predictor for either a move to a new market, looking specifically at how hard is this recession going to hit us, or whatever the case may be. So you're spot on.
So for people who are sobbing in their trucks and cars as they pull over to the side of the road,
nothing to sob about.
We're just talking about business and the ebbs and flows of business. It's not shut the doors and everything's done.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. But no, it's okay, Mark. I wanted to offer something to the listeners or to the viewers. If you do go to my website, Cabinet Maker Profit System, there's a download called the Finance and Forecast Meeting, which is, as you said, a leading indicator. So as a leader, and you run Wilkie Sanderson as well as Innergy, but as a leader of a millwork or cabinetry company, you have to run the finances of the company. You have to watch for the leading indicators. So people have already seen this because it's a very popular download off the website, but it's the agenda for the meeting and the script for the meeting and who should be in the meeting And it helps the business owner of the shop get out of the sawdust and get into this conversation that we're having so we can see the trends and make the adjustments as we need to. So just a reminder to people, go download that.
Absolutely.
Well, so this is, you've painted a good picture here. Well, you've painted a clear picture.
I've painted a picture.
You've painted a picture.
Yes.
And so I want to ask now, the question is, what is this secret formulas that bankers are using? Because the bankers for sure have way more data than you and I can get. They're big data. So what's the secret formula they're running on us when we're not looking?
Yeah, it's referred to the Altman Z-score. So Altman, ALTMAN, space Z dash the word score. So one of the easiest ways, go to Google and look it up. Also, if you wish, there's a tool, and we'll talk about the tool at the end, Dom, I bet, at Innergy's website that allows, you know what, Mark, I'm not into the numbers. I know what my numbers are, but I don't get this. There's some tools out there that you can plug your numbers in and have a sense. Basically, what the Altman Z-score is, it's a statistical prediction of whether or not you as a business will be bankrupt in the next 12 to 16, 18 months.
Well, there was a couple of jabs there before you threw the right. Okay, statistical prediction.
Sorry, let me try that again.
It's a tool of whether I go bankrupt.
Yeah, exactly. So it uses your current data to determine whether or not you are at risk of bankruptcy.
Okay.
Definitely headed in that direction, or man, I'm in a safe zone. And so I promise you, your banks are running this calculation on your financial statements, whether it's monthly, and I would argue right now they're doing it monthly. Given what's going on in terms of book of business, profitability, COVID, all the issues that we're having to face right now, which we've faced before and we've been successful at. But the banks are running this math in the background.
How do we, if they're running this math in the background, do they say to me, now I'm going to do my banker voice, Mark, we ran the Altman Z-score on you and we think you're going to go bankrupt in 9 months? Or are they saying, we're concerned about your debt service ratio. Can you tell us what you're doing about that? What is it they're saying to us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are really 5 pieces, and we're not going to get into the math. It's really hard to talk the math through, but I'd be very happy to help with the math kind of as the call to action here at the end. But one, it's about profitability. So that's the first set of data, if you will, on the score. Profitability. Are you making money or not? It's that simple.
Yeah.
Second, it's about leverage, because profitability is a function of, yeah, I'm making money, but I'm not making enough money to cover my debt service. You already mentioned debt service, Tom. So there's a leverage aspect to this also. Is your cash that you're generating, is the profit that you're generating enough to cover the debt load that you may have?
Sure.
Liquidity, because I would argue that most businesses that go out of business, it's not because of profitability, it's because of cash flow. Yeah. They run out of cash. And so item number 3 that's an input into this Altman Z-score is this concept of liquidity. Solvency, how much, let's just call it your nest egg. Yeah. Income statement during the good times builds up our balance sheet, and that's our nest egg. What we put on that balance sheet used to be cash. And so how much cash do you have built up, either in the form of equity and your AR, et cetera? So how solvent are you as an organization? Yeah. And the last one is a sales efficiency. Let's just call it that. It's the ratio of sales divided by, we're not going to get into the math. But it's how active and how efficient.
Mark, this whole show's about that math. I just try to, I just never try to call it math. I'm always talking about it as if it's not math, and it's, it's
fair
math.
Enough.
It is.
Yep. It's about taking the assets that you have, and are you able to generate sales on those assets? Right. And so that's the number, and that's number 5. So those are the 5 categories.
I have a big question for you, and I'm dropping this as an on purpose bomb. Okay. Item number 4, solvency.
Yeah. Yes.
For those of you who are listening to this show a lot, one of the things you'll consistently hear me plead you to do is buy your real estate. Because it is a form of cash in having the equity in your building. And it doesn't matter which market you live in. If you live in the most expensive real estate in the country, or the cheapest real estate in the country, buy your building. Because it's a forced savings plan that is there as a backstop for you when the
Yes.
financiers look at your numbers.
I agree with you. I happen to be working with a client right now that is in trouble. And I would argue that their real estate down is what's going to get them through this tough time. From a profitability perspective,
Yep.
this year they haven't been, but they have a fair amount of retained earnings or built up equity, sweat equity, whatever you want to call it, in their building.
Yeah.
And so I know that the bank, because the three of us are chatting right now, the bank is looking at that built up equity and helping them out because they like this company. The bank likes the firm. That's one of the 5 C's, if you will, of banking, the character aspect. But you're spot on in terms of real estate. It is a way to take cash, convert it into a long-term asset. And then when you need to make that withdrawal of that asset, you sure can.
Yeah. Yeah. So many people listening are shaking their heads, or they're saying, I can't, or we can't, or it's impossible, or you don't know my market. And to all of those of you who are saying that, I'm going to call BS, because I'm a business coach and I'm supposed to tell you when you're saying BS, just like you listen to me and call BS when you don't like what I'm saying. Buy your building, or find a way to buy a building if you can't buy your building, but you need some sort of assets. I haven't even gotten into the recurring revenue part of my soapbox tirade.
Yes.
Well, we'll get to that in another episode.
Very fair. Very fair.
So what do we do? They're running this report in the background. You're in a situation right now. You talked to, obviously we're not going to share company names, but is it worth talking about the strategy that you're you're sitting down with in the war room saying, this is what we're going to do next? Yeah.
So I can tell you a couple things. I've already run the Altman Z-score on this organization, and they are in the gray area. And so if you do choose to run the score, you will see that anything less than a 1.8 rather, to a 3 is gray. Anything less than a 1.8 is you're in trouble. Anything greater than a 3 is you're in a good spot relative to the Altman. But the Altman doesn't tell the whole story, I would argue. And so Altman is one set of numbers that we've run. We've also looked at a couple other things in terms of help me understand your book of business, because you could score very well on the Altman, but you have nothing in the pipeline for the next 12 months. I think that would end up trumping, to be very candid with you, your Altman Z-score.
If I had a strong 12-month projection.
Yes. And so let's just look a little bit at industry average right now. And again, I'm speaking from a macro perspective, and I know that you have a plethora of clients that are doing everything from home remodels to some architectural work to some 5 million firms. So let me just, on a macro basis, if that's okay. The average backlog right now is about 7 months. That's one of the lowest backlogs in the industry going into any downturn that we've had thus far.
Wow.
When we go back to 2008, that backlog was much longer. The recession was longer. And so those matched. So it depends on how we want to think about it. But step number 1, what's your backlog look like? Do you have 7 months less than, or do you have greater than 7 months on average?
You know, Mark, sometimes people listening to this show, I refer to that as the wave, because we can see work going out into the future and then it drops off, just like the side profile of a wave.
Yes.
And different, people that are doing residential renovations, maybe smaller end things, they can see out 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And then the larger firms, it sounds like Wilkie Sanderson is a larger firm, you might be able to see out 24 months, 36 months for some pending larger projects, or if you're building, casinos, hospitals, things like that.
Yes.
But one of the challenges is here, and it's a big challenge, and I hope people listen for this, is if you look at all of the people that are referring you work, and you get most of your work from one general contractor, and even worse, if you're at one general contractor and one of the project managers at that GC is referring you most of your work, you, my friend, are at risk in a big way. And I know that's what you're talking about when the bank wants to look at your, the pipeline.
Your backlog or your pipeline. Either a book of business. All three of those represent the same thing. And so I'll to your point, Don, because you're spot on. The banks are also looking at concentration risk. And so just a fancy word to describe what you just said. How much of your work is coming from one firm? And so I get dinged from my bank on an annual basis because I have one client that represents anywhere from 25 to 45% of my annual revenue. Now, the bank defines that one client as a company, and it happens to be a nationwide firm. My argument back to the bank is that firm is run by a whole bunch of fiefdoms, not fiefdoms, fiefdoms. Let me get that right.
Small kingdoms.
Kingdom, yeah. There we go. They're independently owned and operated, because you're spot on if it's a PM. And so I can look at the distribution by PMs, and the bank's like, okay. But the bank is looking at your concentration level to try and figure out what's going to happen in the next 12 months with you as an organization. So they're running the Altman. They're looking at your book of business. They're looking at your credit worthiness in terms of, is your AR stretching out? And so is that a signal that there might be something wrong? But you're spot on. If there's a high concentration from one client or one person within an organization, that's not a position of strength going into a downturn.
No. And so one of the things that I talk about on this show, on this podcast, that seems a little foreign to people, because quite often we're moving from being a technician who's really good making things into being a business person who's, when you're a craftsman or a craftsperson or a tradesperson, your tools are the tools in your hand.
Yes.
They are the saws, the chisels, the hammers, the CNC. Those are your tools. When you move to being a leader, your tools are the people who use the tools, and it's a different thing. And so when you move into that leadership role of the company, you have to have other things at your disposal. One of them is marketing, and a lot of people don't like hearing that.
Yeah.
But what Mark and I are saying is it's good to have, let's say, a large general contractor and one project manager there giving you business. We're not saying to get rid of that. We're saying go find more of those. And the way to do that is marketing. And if you want more marketing assistance, for those of you who do listen to the show, go back and listen to some really old episodes called Am I a Spider or a Wolf? Because there's different ways to market. Spiders and wolves are both very efficient predators, but they do their things differently. So you want to know, as a person, as a company, do you want to be more of a spider marketer or a wolf marketer? So just a tip for everybody, go back and listen to those episodes.
Spot on.
So, Altman Z-score. How do I find out my Altman Z-score?
Yeah, so a couple different ways, if you wish. Just type in Google if you wish. That's one method. Second, next time you meet with your banker, just sit down and ask. And so
They're going to get nervous.
Exactly. I'll be very candid with you. After 9/11, I, as a business owner, I was not prepared. And so the 9/11, even though it was a slight bit dip in terms of the industry, it was a major dip for me. There was so much during that 2-year period right after 9/11 that I ended up learning. And one of the mistakes, or one of the learnings, I just asked my banker, what do you look at? What are the things on the back side that's in my file that normally you never share?
Right.
And so he opened the file and we had a great conversation. So things like Altman Z-score, that's where I learned it. Things like, hey, we're looking at the 5 C's. We're looking at capacity, collateral, capital, character. I'll slow that down a little bit. Capacity. What's your capacity? Yeah, for the loan. What type of collateral do you have? What's your capital structure on the backside? It's how much equity. And this goes back to your point, Dom, about the real estate. What does that equity component look like? How much cash have you taken out of the business and put into something that's real, which goes back to number 2, which is collateral. Character, number 4. Yeah, that's a big one. Do I trust you at the end of the day? And that's we can come back to that one here in a moment, and I can give you some stories about what I did during my 2-year problem. I've lost money 2 years out of the 23, 24 that I've been in business. One was the 4th year after the Great Recession. The other was the year immediately after 9/11. And so there's great lessons in those type of problems. But the last one, besides character, is condition. And so back to your original, I rabbit trailed here. Sorry about that, buddy.
No, I'm taking notes. Yeah.
Yeah. So your original question is, how do we learn? 1, Google. That's an easy way to do it. 2, just chat with your banker and ask them to open the file. And I think you'll start to learn some things about the regulators, how they come in, and how there's sampling of your file at your bank, and how your banker reacts to you will be a condition of, was your file recently pulled? Are you part of the audit that's happening on the backside of the bank?
Oh,
And
wow.
what's going on? Even ask your banker what your rating is internally with the bank, because depending on your internal rating, sometimes they won't tell you. That's how much capital they have to put away for your loans. So if you're in a good spot, it's a small percentage. But as you become more and more risky to the bank, they have to put more and more capital away against your loans, which decreases their return on investment. And so just ask your banker. That would be number 2. Number 3, back to your original question, Dom, of, okay, how do I learn more about this? I would offer, go to www.innergy.com and look at our tools download. So there's an Altman Z-score calculator if you wish.
Yeah.
There's also what I refer to as an MS stress test. That might be less math, a little bit easier to understand. And then there's a third one. There's a cash flow calculator if you want to look at what's going on in terms of your balance sheet. So there's some financial tools that we have for you at Innergy.com. You just need to fill out the form, provide some information. And in that form, if you say, hey, I want my information to be anonymous, my staff won't let me see it. But if you say, no, I wouldn't mind Mark taking a look, I'll spend about 15, 20 minutes. I'll do some annotations. I won't know who the company is, but I'll see the data. I'll write what I'm seeing, and my staff will send that back. So I won't know who you are. My staff will.
Very cool.
And you'll get a little bit of a narrative in terms of that information, if that's fair.
So,
yes,
that was big value. So we should stop for a second. Thank you first. So here's what I heard, that on your website, I can look up the Altman Z-score, but I can also see the stress test, and I can also see the cash flow calculator.
Yes, sir.
From many of the conversations that I have with owners in this industry, they're not as on top of their numbers as they would like to be.
Yeah.
And because they're focused mostly on producing excellent quality product, everybody's proud of what they do, which is wonderful.
Yes.
Thankfully, we're in a business of people with ethics, and it's not a lot of charlatans or fly-by-night guys that are just can't make it here to do that, right? But one of the things that quite often slips by is the numbers. And so I'm going to urge people, get on top of your numbers. Call me if you want to put together a numbers dashboard. Listen to the episodes I have with Rick Patak, because Rick and I are talking about the dashboard and the toolbox. A business is a collection of systems that works to build great products and deliver profits back to the owner. And so that's what we have to do, is put these systems in place. Get our head out of the sawdust. No disrespect to the sawdust. It's beautiful. It smells great.
Yes.
But now we're running a business.
Yes. And so if I can comment a little bit, because you just, it's a collection of systems. My phrase, the one that I end up using and I think that this applies even if you're 150,000 annual revenue or 300,000 or that $1 million firm, strategy or success, if you will.
Yeah.
Strategy is an integrated set of activities. So let's just pause on that one for a moment. It's what you do. Because all of us do stuff, but the question is the stuff integrated towards the end game of who we are? So strategy is an integrated set of activities that positions a firm. That gets to your marketing. What's your elevator pitch, Dom? That's your position. Yeah. Are you low-cost provider? Are you a service provider? And there are really 4 ways in this industry. It's either cost, quality, delivery, or service. That's how we compete. And so define your position. So strategy is an integrated set of activities that positions a firm within an industry, because you got to know what the rules to the game are. We're not the pharmaceutical industry. We're not the airline industry. We're the woodworking industry. And there's a different set of rules, different profitability. And the last one is for superior returns. That's what we all want. But we get 3 levers to pull towards that end. What we do, who we are, how we compete. So anyway, you got me excited, Dom, because of your statement.
I'm excited too, because it's thankfully you're agreeing with me is why I'm excited.
I am.
But also, you and I can probably get each other worked up because we talked about business strategy and success. But thankfully, this whole show, the podcast, is about, regardless of the episode, it's about pieces that you and I have talked about today, which is actually really nice to hear, because sometimes I feel like I'm in an echo chamber. Just recently, I'd say the last four months of this year, I've heard more from listeners than I've ever heard before, which is so nice. I'm getting topic suggestions. I'm getting just, hey, thanks, like the show. Sometimes I just get a thank you for not swearing on the show because people listen with their kids in the car, but I'll take it. I'll take it, whatever it is. But I've probably in the last 4 months, I've heard more from listeners than before. But otherwise, I'm just talking to the screen or great guests, and I don't know that people are picking up on this. One of the things you said that really stood out to me was these 5 C's. I wrote them down: capacity, collateral, capital structure, character, and condition. So tell me about character. What can I do to influence character with my banker? Because I think that is the easiest one to overlook, and it is the most impactful one to double down on.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you a story. So again, I told you I've lost money 2 years, and
I've got it here, by the way. I was going to give it back to you later.
Yeah, fair enough. After 9/11, so I was 30, 31 after 9/11. And wet behind the ears, not really knowing what I was doing. I'm from the auto industry, so I still have all my fingers, not knowing the sawdust piece. But here's what I would say for the character piece. Ended up creating a long-term relationship, and I've been with the exact same bank ever since.
Wow.
I didn't know necessarily what I was going to do the next day. But I figured it out, and I told my bank, you know what? I don't know the answer to your question at the moment, but I'm going to tell you the answer Friday. So whatever you do with the bank, make sure that that you don't let bad news does not get better with age.
No.
And so if there's a bad news moment, have the conversation with your banker immediately. Even if you don't have the answers to the questions, because they're going to ask you questions. But you say, great question. I don't know right now, but I'll have the answer for you at the end of the week. Or what are you going to collect, Mark, in terms of AR in the next 5 days? Don't know, but I'll have the answer for you in the week.
Yeah.
I was in a position the year after that I was literally taking the checks that I got to the bank so that I could have a conversation with them about what was going on.
Right.
That gave me an opportunity to meet with my banker and to kill the vacuum of being just a file.
That's where I was going with this, Mark. That's exactly where I was going.
All right.
Because can we do this for a second? Can we play a game?
Yeah.
Let's go to the bankers Monday to Friday, 9 to 5.
Yeah.
You're just a file. They're going to sit around their big boardroom table on the 900th floor of their building.
Yes.
And all of the data is going to be on the table. And they're going to say, people who fall below this score, we're going to do this. Yes. People who are color-coded to gray, they're going to do this. And your banker's going to go, actually, Sanderson over at Wilkie Sanderson, I know that I've been talking to that guy. I think we should move him into this other pile. And then around the table, they go, okay, thank you. There's an exception. But if you just allow yourself to be a number, you're just going to get pushed around on their table.
Exactly.
Am I right there?
You are spot on. And I can promise you that my banker that I was taking those checks to told that story. I now serve on the board for that bank. As an example.
Hey, Mark, does this work then?
Yeah, it does. I'll tell you that.
Wow.
But he has told that story, I don't know, we're now on 20 years. Every time that he introduces me to somebody, he repeats that story and says, oh, by the way, this is the guy that brought checks whenever we had them and would give me a verbal update of where we were.
Right.
If he didn't know, he was honest. And whatever he promised, he achieved. And so that character aspect can trump all the other C's that we talked about.
Yeah.
Within reason, mind you, within reason. But if you want to kind of buy some time and play at the margin and move the needle with your banker, the character one is the easiest one to pull the lever on.
It's an unfair advantage.
It is.
It gives us an unfair advantage, and it's the easiest one to do. Now, many of us have rotating bankers because the banker is just at our branch for a little while until they move on to the bigger branch. However, don't let that be an excuse. Get good at creating those relationships with the bank.
Yes. I continue, of the last 9 years at Wilkie, we've been upper quartile 7 of those 9. I continue to have the same frequency of conversation I do in the good times that I did back in the bad times, if you will.
Right.
And so that pace of information, as my banker says, Mark, you provide more information than a company your size. This is like a $200 million company of what you're telling me, as opposed to 20. You know what? I'm building up that character equity account with my banker,
Yeah.
because maybe there's a withdrawal someday, but now I can make that withdrawal that's non-file driven, if that makes sense. It's not about the file and the numbers, Dom, the point you've already made.
Well, we have those same relationships going on right now. For those of us listening who deal with designers or PMs or anybody, you've got a client who you've dealt with all the time, you have a great relationship. If they say, hey, you don't have the PO, but can you start? You start.
Exactly.
Because you trust them. You've been working with them for years. Hey, we don't have the, I can't get you that change order today, but I'll get it to you tomorrow. You do the work. And it's exactly the same relationship that our banker who provides us money, their product is money. They have something called a cost of funds, a COF, a cost of funds, that a bank, they buy their money, believe it or not, to lend to us, and they have to pay it back, just like we buy product in order to process it and sell it again.
Yes.
Wow, this is a big episode, Mark.
We had a lot in here, Dom.
I have 3 other episodes that I want to ask you about just based on what you talked about in this episode.
Okay. As I told you, my staff always says I have a slide for everything. And I think I've consolidated all my slides. I'm over 1,000. So we could pick a topic, whatever your clients and customers would like.
Well, we're not at 100 episodes yet, but we will be. So actually, let me make this offer to the community of woodworking professionals. If you would like to have Mark or I talk about a topic within this scope that we talked about today, shoot me a text message. My number is 604-837-8361. Just tell me your name and say, I'd like to have you guys discuss X or Y or Z. If you're in Canada, Z, whatever it is. But whatever the topic is, let us know. But I got to go back to this thing, this Altman Z. Mark, how do I find out more about this Altman Z-score? Because that seems like the secret key that I find in one of my kids' video games.
Yep. Yeah. So again, three methods to get there, I would argue. One, Google it. There's a ton of information out there. You can even find out the history of it. Make sure you use the right formula relative to your company. There are different formulas.
Oh, gee.
And the one that we have on our website is for manufacturers. There's one for service providers. There's one, et cetera, because each business is slightly different in terms of the predictive analysis. Mm-hmm. So 1, Google it. 2, chat with your banker. Ask them directly what type of calculations they're doing on the backside. Or if you want to make it easy and hit the easy button, just type in www.innergy.com. Go to Innergy's website. That's INNERGY. And we will do all the heavy lifting for you. All you need to do is tell your CFO or your controller or your accountant to fill out the form. We'll do the analysis and we'll write back to you if you wish. So that's probably the easy button, Dom.
Yeah, well, it's very nice of you to offer that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, did we cover what you wanted to cover today?
Yeah, I think so. More importantly, have we added value, do you think, to your listeners?
We'll find out.
Yes, we will.
The market will. You know what, Mark? You and I can think what we want, but the market will tell us.
Yes,
I'll ask this though: if you did find, the listeners or viewers of the YouTube channel, the people watching this on YouTube, if you have a comment on Mark's background, please leave that in the YouTube. I actually like it. Stands out. It's powerful. But also for those of you listening on the podcast, please leave a review, because if success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. Failure leaves clues. Whether you like this podcast, whether you like the episode or not, please leave feedback so other people know. That's your way and my way of giving back to the community. So let us know if you like this. I can bring Mark back. We can talk about different topics, but let us know through some sort of feedback. Leave it on whatever you listen to your podcasts on, or shoot me a direct message. I would prefer that you leave it on iTunes or Google Play so that everybody in the world knows it, but however you choose to do it. Mark, if you were to leave us with any one thing, if I need to take one action, it's never one, but if I was to take one action coming into what you foresee as the next echo in the market, the burp, the indigestion, what do you think it should be?
Yeah, in the topic of today, there are different things depending on, I would answer it differently if we were talking about different things. But in terms of the topic that we've covered today, and it's just one thing, I would say make an appointment with your banker,
Mm.
give that banker an agenda beforehand of what you want to cover, and it's basically you want to go through your file, because that will give you the insight to a third-party organization, somebody that has control over your destiny. So we normally think about customers and we think about employees, but when there's a downturn, banks get nervous. Have a conversation with the person that has a little bit of control over your destiny, and find out what he or she is thinking. Have that hour-long meeting, and with that, make an investment in that fourth C of character. Because when you leave, that banker's going to go, wow, I got 40 clients, and this is the first one that's done that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Maybe they're different. Maybe we should make an allowance.
Bingo.
Yeah.
Bingo. So if I was going to pick one thing that we talked about today, start the regular conversation with your banker. And if nothing else, find out how they think. That would be conversation number one with an agenda that you send.
Yeah. Well,
Fair?
Mark, thank you. This is big. I think it's been this for me lands solidly on the business owner, business builder side of the equation. I appreciate you bringing that, because we need more of that in the industry. It's easy to look at the tools, and the tools are fun. They're flashy. They're sexy. They cut things. They destroy things. They make sawdust. They create things. But we have to, we're business builders. And as I said before, when I'm a business owner, my tools are the people using the tools. They're no longer the actual tool themselves.
Yes.
And so I have to learn how to manage the people and the processes and the systems, which, again, is what the whole show's about.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Well, thank you so much. It's been great to have you on here.
Hey, thanks for letting me share this hour with you. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Yeah, good. I'm glad. I mean, you were a little worried in the beginning because you're more of a visual guy and you have slides and you speak at a lot of.
Yeah, I like my visuals, so I've been having to constrain myself. Let's look at this PowerPoint. Let me show you this graph. So it's.
We have to convey our messages verbally here. It's a different medium. Yeah.
You stretched me, Dom. You stretched me today. I love it.
All right, Mark. Well, thank you so much for joining. Everybody else listening, thank you so much for being with us. Mark, have a great day.
Hey, take care, sir. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.